Can you live a tax-free retirement if you have a pension? Now, for those without pensions, it can be really realistic to live a tax-free retirement throughout retirement because of the standard deductions and because they may not have that guaranteed income coming in from a pension every single year. All they probably have is Social Security and investments. And as you know, almost 50% of people in the US pay no federal income taxes each year because of those standard deductions. And with the bonus deduction that just got announced by President Trump for those 65 or older, then it's even more of a likelihood that more people are going to be living a tax-free retirement, especially over the next 4 years, why that exists. And so we're going to break it down. If you have a pension, is this even realistic? Is it realistic to keep your income under the standard deduction? And that's what we're going to talk about. And I'll tell you, it's going to depend on a lot of different factors, but that's what we're going to talk through today so you can have a good understanding. And if you may not be able to keep Social Security tax-free, maybe at least you can keep it less taxable. And if you get that $3,000 or $4,000 check month from Social Security every single month, making sure that as much of that can be in your pocket and the least amount to Uncle Sam. And so that's going to be our goal of today's video, and I think you're going to enjoy it.
Joe knows taxes.
Joe knows the market.
Joe knows Social Security.
Joe knows income planning.
Joe knows pickleball? No.
This is Joe Knows Retirement.
So I love this concept. I think of it as divorcing the IRS, from your life is really the concept. And we've got clients who, they're in a great position, but they're still able to be living this tax-free retirement. And so we're going to break this down, and there's some things you have to do in order to get there, but that's what we're going to talk about here today. So let's first understand this idea of the standard deduction. Now, we know right now the standard deduction is pretty generous for most people. So if you're a married couple, it's $31,500 is what it currently is for 2025. Now, that could be half of that if you're single, so just keep that in mind based on your situation. But that's for those who are under age 65. If you're 65 or older, then there comes more deductions that you can get. And so if you're single, you can get an extra $2,000 deduction for being 65 or older. And then if you're married, each spouse could get $1,600, so $3,200 total on top of the $31,500. And then also, as we just talked about, the bonus deduction. So you can get up to $6,000 each as extra deductions, so $12,000 total that goes on top of those other two deductions. And so you can walk away with about $46,700 in deductions. Now, we do have to understand that this is going to be based on your income. And so if your income is too high, you get phased out. The limits are pretty high. It goes all the way up to about $250,000 if you're married. So there's quite a bit of room to be able to raise your income and not have to worry about giving back this money. But there is a phase out. So if you start to get higher and closer to 250, just understand how that operates. So definitely worthwhile to look into, especially if we're going to look at strategies like Roth conversions that we're going to talk about later in the video. But these are things that can really add a lot of value and open the door up for even more as Roth conversions or taking IRA withdrawals, knowing that you've got more ability to take tax-free money up front. And we're going to show you an example of what this looks like with the bonus deduction of how this realistically plays out. And then you can take your pension amount that you're thinking and plug it in of how does this work for you. And so we have to take advantage of these high standard deduction amounts. That's our hope for you here today. And the other thing we have to understand is how is Social Security taxable? So if you do not have Social Security, maybe you never paid into it, maybe your spouse never paid into it, well, then that's not going to be part of your calculation. And you may be able to live that tax-free retirement a little bit easier, knowing you're not going to have that taxation from Social Security if your income is high enough. And so the way this works, and obviously most people nowadays are likely going to get Social Security now with the windfall elimination provision and the GPO. Those are both, out of the door, and you don't have to worry about that anymore. So as long as you've earned it and you've worked your 40 quarters in order to be eligible, then this could be a realistic thing where you can get an extra income from Social Security. So the way Social Security taxes is calculated is based off your provisional income. Now, provisional income is a little more of a complex calculation. We use software for our clients to determine what that is. But basically, it's half of your Social Security and then all the other sources of income that you have added together. And then you go to a chart that shows you how much of your Social Security will be taxable. And it can either be up to 85% of that can be counted as income. Those with six-figure pensions are probably going to find themselves in that position, or you could find yourself at maybe only 20% of your Social Security is taxable as income, or maybe it's 50%. And so there's a calculation to see what that looks like. And we're going to show you the software here to show how this progressively gets worse. And so the way I explain it simply is if your income's from here to here, right, low income, then you'll have your Social Security tax-free. And we're going to show you that here soon. If your income's from here to here, okay, now you're going to have a portion of your Social Security taxable, and then the higher income is, the more of that portion is taxable. And then if it's, from here and on, then you're going to have 85% of your Social Security is going to be counted as income, which can cause you to even creep up tax brackets even more. And we're going to talk about some planning strategies, if that is you, what to do, because a lot of people with pensions find themselves in that category. So I want to show you an example, and here's the case study that we're going through here today. And so this is going to be a married couple who has Social Security of $70,000, and then they're going to retire at 67. So they're going to take their Social Security at full retirement age. That's what made sense for them when we ran the numbers. That doesn't mean that's what you should do. We have clients that take it at 62, some take it at 70. It's just going to depend. But we'll also talk further why it could make sense to even delay it even further than 67. But for their situation, we decided on 67. So I'm not going to show what their pension amount is because I want you to be able to fill in the blank. A lot of people we see, it's not outside their own possibility to have this kind of situation with Social Security. So this could be a really good understanding for your situation of what to look for. So obviously it's not specific, but it'll give you a good idea. And so especially for those who are 65 or older, or maybe you're not 65 or older this year, but maybe you will be next year or the year after. Remember, the bonus deduction goes for 4 years. And so this is something that anyone in that 62 to 65 time the age is going to have to be considerate of this. And so if you show my chart here, it's going to look at a lot of different colors here. And so you're going to see blue, you're going to see purple, you're going to see green, you're going to see these dotted lines, at the 150 and after the $200,000 marks. And so we're going to talk about what this means. And so if you look at the blue, that is going to be the federal income tax bracket. So on the left there, you see 5%, 10%, 15, 20, 25%. Those are the federal tax rates that you're going to have to factor into this conversation. And so if you look at that, you're going to see that we have the 10% bracket, the 12% bracket, 22, 24. All of you are familiar with that. We cut this off a little sooner, but it could go even further than that depending on how much income someone has. And so that's how the federal tax brackets work. Now, we always tell people when looking at tax planning, never only look at just the federal tax brackets. We also want to understand the federal tax brackets are a marginal rate. That means if you find yourself at that $100,000 mark, you're not going to pay 22% on everything. You're only going to pay 22% on that portion that is at that higher amount. Everything else is going to be at that 12%, 10% also the standard deduction. So we always want to make that very clear as well. But then there's two other colors here that we have to make sure we're paying attention to. The first is going to be the purple. That is Social Security taxation. So if you see that little amount early on from about 0 to probably about 30,000 there, that's tax-free. There's no taxes. Why is that? Because of the standard deduction. And we're going to talk more about that here soon, but that's what that is. And then from 30,000 on to probably about 70,000 is where that Social Security will start to become taxable at higher amounts. And so if you first find yourself under the $50,000 mark, you're going to have probably less than half of it taxable. And then as you inch up your income, every $1,000 more you have, you're going to force more of your Social Security to become taxable. So even though you're only in the 12% bracket, you're going to see there that you're paid about 22 or 23% in overall taxes on that because you're forcing your Social Security to become taxable, but it didn't have to be. So every extra income during that portion can be very significant. And that's what we call the Social Security tax torpedo. Sometimes it can be even more significant than what we're showing here. It can spike even further, but in this scenario, this is what it's going to look like. And then if we go even further from this, you'll see that green. Now that green is the bonus deduction phase out that we talked about earlier. And so for a married couple is what this example is showing, just under $100,000 of income is when that's going to be starting to factor in. And that's income outside of Social Security. So this chart's already showing the Social Security baked in because of the purple there. But this is an additional income that you could have. So if you have a $100,000 pension, you're going to find yourself starting to have some of that $6,000 bonus deduction, or in this case, $12,000 because it's a married couple, start to phase out. And then you'll see over towards the $200,000 mark, that's when it's going to be phased out completely. And that can be really easy to understand. Remember that 250,000 is the number. Well, remember 200,000, 85% of our Social Security is taxable. We're probably about 180,000. So you can see how that gets close to that 250,000 income level to show how this chart can be accurate there. And then the dotted lines there, that's the Medicare tier. So you all know that the more income you have, the more you're going to have to pay for Medicare. Now, it's not always fair because you don't necessarily get better coverage, but you do have to pay more. And you can see here in this case, they'd have to pay $1,000 a year extra, and that would be per spouse. So $2,000 extra if their income is over that. And then if they reach the second tier, they're each going to have to pay $2,600 a year more, which is $5,000 total that they're going to have to pay more in Medicare costs just if they hit the second tier. And we also see that a lot of people can even hit the third tier here as well. And so this is why it's really important to understand how this works. So I'm going to share what this looks like for we'll go 4 different people here of what this could look like. So let's say that you have no pension, and I know that's not many people who watch this channel. Most people here have pensions, but let's just show what your peers could be in this scenario. So if you have no pension, where do you find yourself out on the chart from the start? At the 0 mark. And so basically what this says is you could take out $30,000 and you could have your income tax-free. You could have everything from that $30,000 tax-free, and you're not going to force any of your Social Security to become taxable. So some of that will become taxable as provisional income, and so it will be counted as your income. But remember, the standard deduction is $46,000. So my chart shows that all built in. So in this example, if you wanted to take out $30,000, well, that's already including that about $15,000 of Social Security is counted as income. And so that's why we can only take out $30,000 instead of $46,700, which is the number I showed you earlier. And so I want you to understand how that works and how the chart makes it work. So again, this is more of an advanced chart. This is something we use with our clients. We do a lot deeper dive than this, but a lot of people like to see in the weeds of how these calculations are made and what to look for. And if you're getting pretty confused with this, then it's probably a good sign to make sure you're getting help with your retirement plan, because these are some of the really important key things to understand as you look to really optimize these decisions. And so that's how it works. If you have no pension, you could take out $30,000 of income from your investments and you're in a great spot. So if you have no pension, you have your Social Security of $70,000 and you have $1 million saved up, well, your RMD at 73 and 75 is going to be about $40,000. So you're almost living a tax-free retirement, even if you have $1 million. And so it may be strategic to do some Roth conversions to back your 40,000 RMD down to 30,000, to give you an example, so that you can be under those tiers moving forward. And so that's what we look at in this scenario. But again, most people don't have $1 million or more saved. Only 10% of people do. And so for most people, if you have $500,000, no pension, you're always going to be in that standard deduction area for the time being while these generous standard deductions exist. And so that's why it can really be important to understand that. The other key note I want to mention here, these numbers are not guaranteed. We don't know what this will look like in the future. This is, yes, I guess it is guaranteed according to the one big beautiful bill that the permanent tax rates are going to be here for permanent, but we all know that that's not necessarily likely to be the case because this can get changed at any time, but that's just something to understand. And so now I want to talk about if you have a $25,000 pension. So the example number 2 is $25,000. So you're still in the $0, so your pension is technically tax-free because of the standard deductions, but what about your investments that you're going to be forced to take out at those required minimum distribution ages of 73 and 75, as we just talked about? Well, now you're going to start forcing your Social Security to become taxable. And this is when it really I really get worried with people with pensions, is because if they have $2 million, they're going to be forced to take out $80,000. Well, they're forced all the way to have all of their Social Security taxable at 85%. Now, if you have $1 million and yours is $40,000, but you'll see here, you're still going to force the majority of your Social Security to be taxable. And so what do we do to prevent this? Well, that's where Roth conversions can make a lot of sense for someone in your situation. And a lot of people may tell you, don't do Roth conversions. You're in the 12% bracket, right? Because if you look at my chart, you're not even in the 12% bracket. You're in the 0% bracket. But I'm worried about future. And I'm worried about not only federal tax brackets, I'm worried about Social Security taxation. And so even though you're only in the 12% bracket, because you're going to force some of your Social Security to be taxable, your all-in tax rate for that $40,000 is going to be closer to 20% than 12%. And so does it make sense to look to do Roth conversions, now at potentially, 22, 24 or lower, depending on what your situation looks like? That's all the things that you have to look into to make that decision. But if you were to pull out from a Roth during this time, then that's tax-free, and you're also not only saving the 12%, but you're saving that taxation on Social Security, which can lead to a lot of savings over time. And this can be extremely helpful for those who maybe not have taken Social Security yet, and maybe they're delaying Social Security, which is another strategy we look at for people. If you wait till 70 to take Social Security, well, then that gives you, in this example, multiple years to be able to do some Roth conversions and maybe even stay in the 12% while lowering that down. And no, we've done another video on this, that 12% may not be enough when you do a Roth conversion for those who have been diligent savers, because you're not even being able to convert the interest that you gain each year. And so oftentimes you're going to end up with even more in tax deferred over time. And so you may have to be more, do more significant conversions over time as well. So that could be something else to consider as well. Now, let's look at example number 3 here. If we had a moderate $50,000 pension, which is pretty popular with the people we see here on this channel. And so in that case, you're right in the middle of that Social Security taxation, right? So very similar to that $25,000. Anything extra you take out is going to be taxable there. So you're going to find that, if you take any investment withdrawals, almost all of your Social Security is going to be taxable there. And then the last example here I want to show is if you have a $100,000 pension. Now, that's a big pension. We have clients that even have way bigger than that, but this is a pretty generous pension for most people that we see. And so if you have 100,000, you now have to start being worried about that bonus deduction getting phased out. You're always going to have your Social Security fully taxable, so you can't worry about that anymore, but you do have to worry from a standpoint of it's going to force your income higher into these higher brackets, which is 22% is the one you're in right away before any investment withdrawals. And so that's something we really want to make sure we're planning ahead of. Knowing you're never going to be in a lower bracket, maybe that's a reason to do some larger Roth conversions, maybe all the way up to the 24% bracket, which for those who are married, that could be almost $425,000 of income that you can have and still stay in the 24% bracket. Now remember, it's a marginal rate, so only the 24% bracket. Everything else would be at the lower brackets before you hit that point. And another thing to think about if you find yourself with these pension amounts that we're talking about is maybe you could even look to defer your pension. So not everyone can do this, but we do have some clients who can defer their pension to a later date. And if you do that, just as we talked about deferring Social Security, that will allow you to do more tax planning now, maybe think more Roth conversions, or maybe withdrawing more from your IRAs for income now that you don't have those other incomes, to not have as much of a withdrawal impact in the future. So those are all realistic strategies that we've seen clients do that really leads to a lot of success over time. And also, if you're watching this and you're still working, maybe think about starting to contribute to a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k. So a lot of 401ks offer that now, or 403bs, or deferred comp, or TSP. And these are ways that you can start to get more of a diversification, because most people have all their money in tax deferred, very little in tax free. This is a way that you can start to have more of a balance with those assets by starting to do that now. So Roth contributions, conversion, these are all opportunities for most people to think about. And again, as we talked about in the video today, the goal was to live that tax-free retirement. As we showed here, if you have, $50,000 pension or more, you don't have a chance. Under today's rules, if you have $25,000 pension or less, it could be realistic if you plan the right way. And so hopefully this video was educational for you. I'd love for you to put in the comments, what questions do you have from this video? Is there anything from this video that I could do additional content on to help you further understand this really important concept of Social Security taxation for those with pensions? Because obviously everyone with a pension is typically going to have this issue or run into this problem with Social Security taxation. As I mentioned, not everyone will, but this crowd certainly will. So hopefully this was helpful. We'll put up some more videos here on the Social Security taxation so you can learn more about that if that's of interest to you. And hopefully that can be helpful as you plan your retirement. So we'll see you on the next video of Joe Knows Retirement.